Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Dashy putting plenty of rumours to bed by saying that he will indeed guaranteed be on the OpTic Texas roster next season. He's got the contract signed, he's sitting back and relaxing and getting ready to go. But also Doug Censor Martin, in a lot of beef and dramas over the last few days, suggests that FaZe should look at him, Doug Censor Martin, back to FaZe in order to return to the glory days of where they were a few years ago. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. First of all, big story emerging yesterday on the future of the Call of Duty League and the Overwatch League together. So both properties of Activision Blizzard, and the idea has been floated of unifying brands across the CDL and the OWL. Now, I don't watch any of the OWL, I never really followed it even before the CDL existed, but plenty of the organizations have teams in both. Even the Dallas Fuel, right, they still exist, do they not? And they're owned by Envoy, or, you know, Envoy disappeared and it's now just OpTic effectively. But the Los Angeles Guerrillas, they play as the Gladiators, or it's effectively the same team. Boston Uprising, Boston Breach, you know how it goes. And this seems to be a step towards Activision realizing that this whole, you know, city-based idea, and especially the idea of the teams having to build a new brand from scratch to join these leagues, just never really made much sense. So possibly Atlanta Reign could go as FaZe in both categories. Now I think in fairness, looking at most of the brand names, the Call of Duty League ones in my opinion are better, and the branding is often better at times than some of the properties they have over there in the Overwatch League side. But look, is it possible that Dallas Fuel could become OpTic Texas in the Overwatch League situation, or could they just become OpTic Gaming? And this is the question that I have. And I think that we might well eventually get to that point where teams will be able to say, you know what, we don't really need the cities anymore. This is just one step of Activision effectively backtracking and saying, you know what, all right, probably this concept we had initially wasn't the ideal one, and the teams are pushing for other ideas, and apparently they're also potentially pushing for, you know, getting rid of the geolocation entirely. That might not happen immediately, but it might well happen soon. And even as the rotation say, to add to this, a possible merger between the two league identities and brands would allow some teams to drop the city-based names. At least one organization is already planning for that eventuality. Now many people would say, okay, this has got to be OpTic, right? Because OpTic would, I'm sure Hex would love to just be OpTic Gaming again. Obviously, I can't read his mind or anything, but from what he said on stream and stuff, I think, like, he knows that OpTic is much bigger than just Texas. It's much bigger than just even the country of the USA, right? Fans all over the world. So, you know, having the geolocation never made that much sense to me, especially for an organization like OpTic. So maybe this is OpTic, maybe it's an entirely different team, because there are other organizations that probably would prefer to keep their city involved, such as the Minnesota Rokkr. But then again, if they're partnering with G2, maybe G2 have a different concept for what they want to do. So I think it's possible that in the next couple of years, a lot of these city-based names drop out, and they might well drop out alongside some teams keeping them, right? Maybe if Seattle moved to Vancouver, where, you know, they've got some other teams located there, I think is it the Vancouver Titans or something, that they own in the Overwatch side, they could either merge those brands, or they could say, you know what, we actually quite like being based in Vancouver, so we're going to keep that in our name because it's part of the identity. But other organizations will say, we don't really want to, so we can depart from it. Who knows, but it's a big development that might well continue to happen here, and I did think this is interesting from Jacob L, just kind of analysing which brands are better, because Ultra to me is better than Defiant. Maybe you guys disagree, but I quite like it. Boston better than Uprising. Gladiators does clear Guerrillas in my opinion, but most of the other ones that have shared branding is probably just straight up better what we have in the CDL. So maybe it's going to affect the OWL more than it will the CDL, but only for now. But I did also want to mention this to Mr. Adam Apicella, founder of MLG Esports Engine, talking about how the unification of the brands makes sense to me, but it's not the root of the issue. Now, he's made a few takes, and when Adam Apicella talks, you've got to listen, right? It's just how it is. But yeah, he said a few things there that I'm not sure I fully agree with, but this I think is actually pretty on the money. The issue is that revenue in the esports space is not there yet, while there is still rampant spending to sate unreasonable fan desires. What should be done is to look at co-located events for both IPs. This will drastically lower costs, increase revenue on all fronts, and encourage cross-pollination. When publishers began demanding their titles be the only title in the room was when esports started to lose its way. The games are sold on the same physical or digital shelf, they're broadcast on the same platforms, there's nothing but negatives from siloing games. Make a loud moment with massive fan parties and experiences, own the weekend on streaming platforms. This all happens by shelving egos and focusing on doing cool stuff. So this is, you know, this used to happen back in the day. MLG and other tournament organizers would run massive events with Call of Duty, Halo, StarCraft, it was all going on. And the most fun events I've ever attended are ones where there's a lot happening. Like Toronto was great fun because it was the main thing, but it was also the big challenges venue just down the hall. There was also plenty of sponsor booths and stuff and games you could play all around the venue. It's the same feeling that I had back in Anaheim 2019. And okay, there, I don't think there was too much else going on at the time, but it's just a massive venue with so much happening all across the place. And I certainly think it's a valid idea to try and go back to something a little bit more like that, because the last few years, the way that Activision have tried to push esports in the more traditional sports direction maybe doesn't make so much sense, and especially from a revenue perspective and a cost perspective, which is just straight up a little bit too high right now. Let's talk about some teams for next year. Parasite was saying actually that he reckons that a lot of these teams have no idea the type of people they're hiring to make their decisions. I'm sure he'd like a spot as a coach or something next year. But even Tommy mentions, former, of course, legendary UK Call of Duty player, joined 100 Thieves for some time, seriously interested in starting the path of becoming a CDL coach next year, have a lot of experience in competing at the highest level. So, yeah, Tommy, Slacked, Parasite, lots of OGs looking to get in. There's not that many teams to go around, but I do think Tommy here could do a fantastic job. Let's talk Doug then, right? So, Doug has been going off on the main stage of the last few days. I also thought this is pretty interesting, right? I didn't even realize this at the time, that this comeback, you guys might remember, we talked about this comeback, and there's a bit of drama about it actually at the time. But, you know, so down 213 to 37, and they won this map somehow. They lost game 5, and this is one of the things I was like, well, you know, look, it was a crazy comeback online against, you know, Jimbo and co, actually. Of course, it was out of it cheating, but because they lost game 5, it was like, well, you know, it was kind of all for naught in some respects. But actually, they lost game 5 to Jimbo, who was cheating. So, you know, and also, as he says, we lost game 5 because of Jimbo's wall hacks and Hotel S&D. It was crazy. So it does actually add even more, you know, credence to the idea that this is a fantastic comeback from Doug. Is it, in my opinion, going to go down as the greatest hardboy comeback of all time? No, but still, he did do it against a cheater, which does, you know, you got to give fair play for that one. But Doug was also talking about FaZe. So we know that as of this morning, there were the rumors going around that probably Drazah is FaZe's top guy, but it's not guaranteed. They're looking at other options, I'm sure, and until Monday, nothing can actually get signed anyway, so things can all change until the last minute. Doug was on FaZe back in the day, had a lot of his success on the FaZe organization, and he reckons that looking at his playstyle and what FaZe needs, they need a player like Doug. And honestly, look, they're not going to get Doug. But I will say that FaZe don't really need any more slaying, do they? They need a player that can do a good job and a good role on their team, and I don't think Doug is the best option out there, but I do think that he could fill the gaps to some degree.
I'm not going to lie, guys. I'm probably the best fourth for FaZe. No bullshit. People are going to meme me for this, but I'm probably the absolute best fourth. I'm literally the best fourth for FaZe Clan. They don't need anyone other than a guy to tell them where to go on the map, what to do, and like soak all their OBJ and plant their bombs and just like calm everything perfectly. I would make everyone on that team look like they're already gods. Everyone knows how godlike they are. I would make them look like mega superstar gods. They would be like gods on steroids. Imagine like if you could clone me times 4 and I'm on steroids. That would be what Atlanta FaZe would be if I was on the team.
Wait, I thought it was. All I know is I'm on the roster, bro. Like, I'm on the roster. Like, is that intel for you guys? Like, I'm on the roster. Like, I have an idea of what's happening. You know, I'm on the roster, so I'm just playing Valorant.
So I know some of you guys were saying last night in the comment section, right, about how, oh, you know, Doug, I hope that he gets in the league so he can get humbled real fast. And we'll see about that one, right? We'll see how, you know, Doug can get back in at some point. He's not going to get back in on FaZe, right? I mean, there's no way these guys are going to come in and give him the offer. It would be very entertaining and interesting to see if they gave it a go. But look, it's not going to happen. Would Censor actually be a good fit, though? I think that it's not... Like, it's not the ideal fit, is it, fundamentally, and you want someone who could drop, you know, more than a 0.9. But Doug has kind of been playing that flex position so far this season, right? And I feel like, you know, some of the decisions over the last few years, certainly getting Slasher, it was like, well, you know, we'll just bring in another top AR that can slay heavy and do the job. But, you know, really, in terms of comms and the way the AR partnership was working, it wasn't always going so well. We'll leave that there for now. The other point was, of course, from Dashy, though, pretty much confirming, playing Express S&D last night, that he's going to be on OpTic. Now, this isn't a massive surprise, but I think that he's definitely saying this because he's got the new contract signed, right? If his contract wasn't yet signed and nothing was actually locked in yet, I don't think he would just be sitting there saying, oh yeah, it's all good, guys, I'm definitely on the team next year, just sitting back and relaxing and enjoying the party for now, because I don't think he'd be saying that if he wasn't absolutely 100% confident that he's going to be there next year. So no real surprises, but it is interesting just because many people have said, oh, what, Ghosty, they should have kept him over Dashy and this type of stuff. I'm not so convinced by that, but I think this season will be quite telling as to what Dashy's future is going to be and whether he can keep up the progress that I think he made last season into what is going to be a very good team. Now, I wanted to just look at a couple of things before we close out here on the presumed rosters that some people have been coming up with. This is Ant in the rotation here, has put together his rosters, or just some ideas in general on what OpTic might do. Dashy, Shotzzy, Pred, Drazah, Scrap, Insight, CleanX, Envoy. Like, if Toronto can do that after all, then I don't know where their money issues came from. And that's a very nice team. Like, in theory, if they can just upgrade Hicksy to Envoy, that's a great result. I don't think that's what's going to happen, though. There's definitely been some interesting ideas going around as to where Slasher could go, potentially. Here we've got Slasher and Awakening as an AR duo. I heard some talk as well about Slasher and Ghosty potentially somewhere as a duo, which would be pretty interesting as well. I'm not so sure I like this SMG duo, though, Standy and Mack. I feel like that's just a recipe for disaster. And I also saw this here from Zoom Viper on Reddit, so I thought I'd share it for you guys. And this isn't too bad, to be honest. I mean, this is coming out before the rumors we heard earlier today. This is still including the Drazah and Envoy to OpTic thing, which is probably not going to happen at this point, but you never know. FaZe would get Sib in that case. Subliners, of course, would stick it out. Thieves would then be that roster that we saw rumored the other day with Pred going over there, which is still not out of the realms of possibility. And then you get down to some interesting teams like, Slasher and Ghosty as a duo. Again, I'm not sure I particularly like this Standy Nero combination on the sub side, but it's maybe an option they could consider. Boston with Clay, Beans, Kremp and Snoopy. I don't mind it. I think that if you can get someone else instead of Kremp with maybe a bit more experience, that's kind of what I prefer to do. But we'll see what they decide to come up with. And there's also more discussion here about Awakening to Surge. It's a pretty interesting idea, right? That maybe they keep Mack around, they bring somebody else in and Awakening, and like a veteran AR, such as an Attack, for example, to try and figure that out. It's an interesting combination. Also, Los Angeles Guerrillas. I thought this is pretty interesting with Arcitys, iLLeY as the duo that we believe are going to be going there, but we're not exactly sure. And then with Huke and Vivid. So Huke returning to Guerrillas, and then Vivid returning to Guerrillas possibly as an option. And even these, Ravens teams with Harry and Nasty and Afro potentially going back there, and even Hicksy. Like, there's some nice potential UK squads you could put together if Ravens actually wanted to. And unfortunately for Cammy here, he's stuck on Vegas, which I feel like is a little bit, unfair for him in some respect. I feel like Cammy should get a better chance, but he's certainly not as hot of a name free agent as he was last season when all the talk was about Cammy to OpTic. That then fell through when they decided to run it back. So very much interested to your thoughts on all this in the comment section below. Just one final thing to close out that was kind of funny, because Dashy and many other pros have been playing a lot of Valorant lately, and they're going to move it to console, it seems, and that there's some required qualifications. Played console FPS games at the professional level, currently ranked Immortal or higher in PC Valorant. So Dashy is more than likely going to get the chance to test out console Valorant at some point, and he's even mentioned that maybe post his Call of Duty career, playing Valorant might be an option, and if there was some sort of like Valorant console league, that'd be really interesting. But very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.